On the crisp morning of April 2nd, 1988, a terrified young man hurled himself from the second-story window of a quiet, unassuming house on Charlotte Street in Kansas City. Clad in nothing but a dog collar, he struck the ground hard, scrambling to his feet, to sprint desperately down the pavement toward a neighboring porch. He pounded on the heavy wooden door, gasping for breath and pleading for sanctuary from the residence he had just escaped. He had endured 4 unyielding days of psychological terror and chemical restraint, trapped inside a meticulously organized suburban nightmare. When patrol officers pulled up to the curb minutes later, they expected a routine neighborhood disturbance or a simple domestic dispute. Instead, the responding authorities encountered a physically broken survivor pointing a shaking finger back at a modest 2-story home with peeling paint. This frantic, breathless escape shattered the quiet facade of a mundane street and instantly unraveled one of the most chilling, undetected crime sprees in Missouri history. To understand the profound shock that eventually gripped Kansas City, one must first walk the vibrant avenues of the Westport district in the mid-1980s. Located just south of the downtown commercial center, Westport served as an eclectic haven for artists, musicians, and independent merchants. Brick storefronts lined the uneven sidewalks, housing bustling flea markets, antique shops, and local taverns that drew foot traffic from dawn until dusk. Beneath the glow of sodium streetlights, the community thrived on a tight-knit sense of neighborly trust and collective security. Residents gathered on front porches during humid summer evenings, lulled by the deafening hum of cicadas and the distant rumble of city buses. It was a neighborhood where everyone seemingly knew everyone else, creating an invisible shield against the rising urban crime rates of the decade. Among the local fixtures stood Robert Berdella, a soft-spoken business owner who ran a curiosity shop named Bob's Bizarre Bazaar on Westport Road. He presented himself as a pillar of civic responsibility, frequently organizing community events and managing his store with meticulous attention to detail. Residents admired his dedication to the area, rewarding him with the trusted position of neighborhood watch captain for his residential block on Charlotte Street. From this respected vantage point, he liaised directly with local law enforcement, passing along tips about petty thefts and lawyering. Behind this carefully cultivated mask of civic duty, the neighborhood watchman observed the transient currents of the district with an entirely different motive. The bustling energy of Westport attracted not only established merchants but also a steady stream of young men seeking temporary shelter or day labor. Rooming houses and cheap apartments filled the gaps between historic homes, offering a landing pad for those trying to navigate the harsh economic realities of the era. These individuals often carried their belongings in single duffel bags, moving from one low-paying kitchen job to another. They were sons and brothers stepping into adulthood, struggling to build a solid foundation in a city recovering from industrial decline. Many lacked reliable transportation, relying entirely on the kindness of local business owners or the tight informal networks of the neighborhood to find work. This environment created a unique vulnerability, masking the sudden relocations or prolonged absences of its temporary residents as normal life transitions. A quiet departure rarely raised immediate alarm among landlords or neighbors, as transient movement was an accepted rhythm of the district. The local police department maintained a heavy focus on property crimes and visible public disturbances, leaving little institutional bandwidth to track young men who frequently changed addresses. This specific geographic and socioeconomic dynamic formed a perfect blind spot for a patient, methodical predator. The respected watch captain understood this dynamic perfectly, recognizing that the societal invisibility of these young men offered him absolute cover. He used his status as a community helper to offer odd jobs, leveraging small amounts of cash to gain the trust of those desperate for a lucky break. Jerry Howell lived his 19 years of life embedded within this intricate neighborhood web, known to his family as a deeply caring and sensitive soul. He spent his days exploring the eclectic shops of Westport, piecing together a modest living while trying to carve out a definitive path forward. Like many young men facing the daunting transition to adulthood, he navigated typical youthful struggles, including occasional financial hardships and periods of uncertainty. Despite these hurdles, he maintained strong vital connections with his family, refusing to let his personal challenges sever his ties to his loved ones. His father, Paul Howell, stood as a constant anchor in his life, providing emotional support and a steady ear during moments of doubt. Jerry possessed a trusting nature, often looking for the good in the older established figures of his community. He frequently engaged in long conversations with local shopkeepers, trading stories and seeking advice on securing steady employment. His daily routine involved walking the familiar tree-lined stretch between his temporary lodgings and the vibrant commercial center. He carried a quiet hope for stability, dreaming of a future where he could secure a permanent residence and ease the worries of his devoted father. He possessed the entire expanse of his adult life ahead of him, filled with the raw potential to overcome his temporary obstacles. Nobody in his devoted family could have possibly anticipated that his trusting nature would lead him directly into an inescapable snare. The suffocating humidity of July 5, 1984, marked the definitive point of no return for Jerry Howell and the Kansas City community. On that sweltering Thursday, Jerry set out to meet the respected proprietor of Bob's Bizarre Bazaar, seeking an opportunity to earn a small amount of cash. The physical distance between the busy storefront on Westport Road and the quiet residential sanctuary at 4315 Charlotte Street was merely a matter of blocks. Jerry walked this familiar route under the glaring summer sun, crossing through intersections he had navigated hundreds of times before. He approached the two-story house with its neat exterior and heavy wooden front door, harboring no suspicion of the absolute terror waiting beyond the threshold. Upon stepping inside, the heavy, metallic click of the deadbolt locking behind him severed his connection to the outside world forever. Within the span of a single afternoon, the vibrant 19-year-old completely vanished from the bustling streets of the Westport district. He failed to return to his lodgings, leaving his few personal belongings untouched and his daily routine abruptly frozen in time. Days passed in agonizing silence, stripping away any comforting illusions that Jerry had simply taken an impromptu trip out of the city. The sudden absolute cessation of contact stood in stark contrast to his established habit of checking in with his loved ones. Paul Howell immediately sensed a profound, chilling wrongness in his son's abrupt silence, knowing Jerry would never abandon his family without a single word. Driven by a father's protective instinct, Paul launched his own frantic search through the familiar haunts and local businesses of the Westport area. He questioned store owners, corner merchants, and transient laborers, desperately trying to trace the final footsteps of his missing child. The trail of fragmented memories consistently led back to the neighborhood watch captain and the promise of casual labor on Charlotte Street. Armed with this specific connection, Paul walked through the heavy glass doors of the Kansas City Police Department to file an urgent missing persons report. He pleaded with the desk sergeants to launch a comprehensive search detailing his son's trusting nature and the unusual circumstances of his sudden departure. The grieving father placed his ultimate faith in the investigative power of the local authorities, expecting a swift tactical response to secure his son's safe return. Instead, Paul collided directly with a rigid, devastating administrative protocol regarding the classification of missing adults. Because Jerry was 19 years old and possessed a documented history of transient living arrangements, the system viewed his disappearance through a lens of extreme skepticism. The law enforcement database required specific criteria to classify a case as endangered, a threshold that heavily favored clear physical evidence of a struggle. Without a damaged vehicle, a ransacked apartment, or a verified ransom demand. The sprawling bureaucratic machinery defaulted to the most convenient assumption. Detectives assigned to the missing persons desk officially labeled Jerry Howell as a voluntary runaway, a tragic misclassification that paralyzed the investigation before it truly began. This specific paperwork designation carried severe procedural consequences, stripping the case of the urgent resources typically allocated to active abductions. Patrol officers received no mandate to conduct extensive grid searches, and forensic teams remained entirely unassigned to the quiet property on Charlotte Street. Paul Howell refused to accept this bureaucratic dismissal, relentlessly pressuring investigators to scrutinize the respected business owner who last saw his son alive. Yielding to the father's intense persistence, detectives initiated a brief surface-level interview with Robert Berdella regarding the events of early July. The neighborhood watch captain met the authorities with a calm, cooperative demeanor, utilizing his established civic reputation to disarm their professional suspicions. He smoothly admitted to hiring Jerry for a minor task, but insisted the young man had simply collected his wages and walked away into the summer evening. Investigators possessed no search warrant to breach the residence, relying entirely on the outward appearance of the respected community leader. Lacking any outward signs of distress on the property and facing a complete absence of physical evidence, the detectives formally cleared the shop owner of any involvement. The police department closed the inquiry into the specific tip, firmly cementing the narrative that a legal adult had merely chosen to start a new life elsewhere. This catastrophic investigative dead end effectively sealed the fate of Jerry Howell, trapping him permanently behind locked doors while the outside world simply stopped looking. Following the administrative dismissal of Paul Howell's desperate pleas, the Kansas City Police Department redirected its limited manpower toward visible street crime, leaving an unexamined void at 4315 Charlotte Street, behind the peeling pate of the two-story residence. The respected community leader began compiling a grotesque, organized archive of his activities. He purchased heavy-bound notebooks and large quantities of Polaroid film from local camera supply stores, dedicating an entire hidden closet space to his dark administrative tasks. He sat beneath the dim incandescent bulb of his basement, logging precise chemical dosages and exact timestamps of captivity in tight clinical handwriting. The predator utilized potent animal tranquilizers and strict veterinary anesthetics, relying on his knowledge of chemical compounds to maintain absolute, terrifying control over the environment. These substances paralyzed the victims physically while leaving their conscious minds trapped in a state of continuous psychological dread. The changing seasons brought the spring of 1985, and the heavy wooden door on Charlotte Street opened for a second target. In April 1985, 21-year-old Robert Sheldon walked into the Westport district seeking temporary labor and vanished from the face of the earth. Sheldon maintained close ties to his immediate circle, holding on to aspirations of establishing a permanent trade in the bustling city. When his routine abruptly stopped, associates attempted to retrace his path, but the sprawling, transient nature of the neighborhood swallowed their informal inquiries. Law enforcement received the scattered reports of his absence, but applied the exact same procedural logic that doomed Jerry Howell. Detectives filed Sheldon away under the broad classification of an adult runaway, failing to recognize the microscopic overlap in the geographic data. During the administrative freeze on the case files, the civic leader of Charlotte Street perfected his dual existence. He stepped out of his front door every Tuesday morning, smiling at neighbors and waving to passing patrol cruisers while hauling thick, heavy-duty black bags to the curb. The city municipal trash service operated on a strict schedule, dispatching large sanitation trucks down the narrow residential lanes to collect the weekly refuse. These unsuspecting sanitation workers hoisted the bags into the crushing hydraulic press of the truck, erasing the only physical evidence that could trigger a homicide investigation. The system operated with mechanical efficiency, transporting the concealed permanent end of the captives directly into the massive expanse of the municipal landfill. By utilizing the established rhythm of city services, the predator bypassed the need for suspicious midnight burials or risky transportation of evidence across county lines. On June 22, 1985, the calculated snare captured a third young man named Mark Wallace. Wallace navigated the same economic margins as the previous victims, looking for stability and trusting the wrong offer of assistance in the Westport corridor. His sudden silence mirrored the established pattern, prompting another wave of quiet concern among his immediate peers that failed to breach the high walls of police skepticism. The neighborhood watch captain maintained his active correspondence with local police commanders during this exact period, typing formal letters regarding noise complaints and suspected burglaries on his block. The authorities responded with polite gratitude, commending the shop owner for his vigilant dedication to neighborhood safety. This continuous dialogue created a thick shield of perceived innocence, blinding the patrol officers who regularly drove past the House of Horrors. The onset of autumn in 1985 exposed a massive fatal flaw in the technological infrastructure of the Kansas City Police Department. The Missing Persons Division relied on fragmented paper-based filing systems, lacking a centralized digital database to cross-reference the disappearing young men. Detectives stationed at different precinct desks processed the intake forms independently, missing the crucial geographic connection that tied the vanishing individuals to the Westport district. The lack of a shared communication network meant the patrol units covering Charlotte Street possessed zero knowledge of the mounting disappearances occurring within their specific patrol grid. On September 26, 1985, 25-year-old James Ferris became the fourth individual to step through the heavy door of the unassuming residence. Ferris possessed a vibrant spirit and maintained regular contact with his loved ones, rendering his sudden evaporation suspicious to those who knew his daily habits. The predator subjected Ferris to the exact same regimen of chemical restraint and psychological torment, logging the deterioration of his hope in the thick spiral notebooks. He forced the captive to endure unimaginable psychological pressure, utilizing the paralyzing effects of the veterinary anesthetics to crush any physical attempt at resistance. During the long stretches of captivity, the community leader stood behind the glass counter of Bob's Bizarre Bazaar, selling oddities and greeting customers with a calm, practiced smile. He compartmentalized his existence with terrifying precision, leaving the basement locked and silent while he engaged in mundane commerce mere miles away. The administrative divide within law enforcement provided him with absolute operational freedom, as no detective possessed the holistic view necessary to recognize the active serial predator in their midst. The bitter chill of winter gave way to the humid summer of 1986, bringing another vulnerable soul into the immediate orbit of the Curiosity Shop owner. Todd Stoops lived his 21 years holding on to a deep, abiding love for his family, despite the turbulence of his transient living situation. He kept a familiar routine within the city, checking in with relatives to reassure them of his well-being and his ongoing search for steady employment. Stoops possessed a distinct physical presence and a memorable personality, making his interactions with local merchants and neighbors frequent and recognizable. On June 17, 1986, Stoops vanished without leaving a single trace behind in his rented room or the local taverns he frequented. His sudden departure defied all established logic for those who understood his deep emotional ties and his reliance on the local support network. The heavy door on Charlotte Street locked behind him, plunging him into a sterile, documented nightmare governed by the ticking clock of the watch captain's logbook. Inside the soundproofed walls of the basement, the captor expanded his grotesque photographic collection, snapping dozens of Polaroids that captured the grim, irreversible descent of his latest victim. He recorded the precise milligrams of animal tranquilizers administered, treating the horrific captivity as an organized clinical experiment. Stoops endured weeks of deliberate psychological devastation, isolated from the family that desperately began searching the streets for his face. The physical distance between the captive in the basement and the bustling sidewalks of the neighborhood measured merely a few dozen yards, yet it represented an unbridgeable abyss. The family of Todd Stoops refused to let his memory fade into the bureaucratic machinery, launching an aggressive campaign to force a police response. They pooled their limited financial resources to print hundreds of missing person flyers, plastering the bold black and white images across telephone poles, storefronts, and bus stops throughout the Westport area. Relatives canvassed the neighborhood block by block, asking direct questions and holding on to the desperate hope that someone had witnessed his final movements. They marched into the local police precinct, carrying the stack of flyers and demanding an escalation of the investigation based on his undeniable deviation from his normal habits. This profound familial dedication collided with a specific factual dead end rooted in the rigid, uncompromising protocols of the era. The assigned detectives reviewed the case file, noted the age of the missing man, and focused entirely on his history of temporary addresses rather than the passionate testimony of his loved ones. Law enforcement officials told the family that the young man had moved away to start a new life, citing the lack of a crime scene as definitive proof of a voluntary departure. The system demanded physical evidence of foul play before allocating resources, disregarding the logical impossibility of a man abandoning his entire life without taking a single possession. This strict adherence to policy provided the watch captain with a massive operational shield, validating his strategy of targeting those on the economic margins. The police logged the family concerns but closed the investigative loop without dispatching a single forensic team to comb the neighborhood. The flyers weathered and tore under the harsh summer storms, symbolizing the tragic failure of a system designed to protect the vulnerable. The arrival of 1987 cemented a horrifying rhythm of normalized terror at the Charlotte Street residence. The neighborhood watch captain continued to host community meetings in his living room, pouring coffee for concerned citizens while a profound darkness remained locked just beneath their feet. The sheer volume of the hidden archive grew to staggering proportions, filling the bedroom closet with hundreds of carefully dated Polaroids and densely packed logbooks. He indexed the photographs chronologically, creating a continuous visual timeline that documented the specific psychological attacks inflicted upon the young men. He forced his victims to confront their absolute powerlessness, breaking their hope while recording their reactions with cold clinical detachment. The constant hum of the basement dehumidifier and the thick foundation walls masked any auditory clues, ensuring the heavy silence of the property remained unbroken. He walked the neighborhood streets during the evening hours, taking detailed notes on broken streetlights and suspicious vehicles to report back to his police contacts. The local precinct commanders continued to view him as an invaluable asset, blind to the reality that their most dedicated informant was orchestrating a massive undetected crime spree. The systemic failure to recognize the pattern of missing young men emboldened the predator, reinforcing his arrogant belief in his own absolute superiority over the authorities. He viewed the local detectives as bureaucratic paper pushers, manipulated through a combination of civic cooperation and the flawless disposal of evidence through the city sanitation trucks. The stifling heat of June 1987 brought 20-year-old Larry Pearson into the fatal snare, marking the fifth recorded disappearance linked to the Westport corridor. Pearson harbored quiet ambitions and sought a stable footing in the community, working temporary jobs to fund his basic necessities. His interaction with the curiosity shop owner began with the offer of minor labor, an innocent transaction that exploited Pearson's pressing need for income. Once inside the Charlotte Street residence, the heavy deadbolt secured his fate, adding another chapter to the gruesome handwritten logs resting on the basement desk. The captor refined his chemical methods, utilizing the veterinary anesthetics with practiced precision to strip away Pearson's physical autonomy. The psychological torture escalated as the predator wielded absolute control over his captive's reality, documenting the grim progression in stark, undeniable photographs. Following the tragic permanent end of the captivity, the civic leader reverted to his flawless disposal routine. He placed the heavy black bags on the curb under the cover of early morning darkness, waving at the sanitation workers as they hauled the tragic secrets into the belly of the hydraulic press. The municipal landfill swallowed the evidence, leaving 0 trace elements, 0 DNA markers, and 0 physical clues for law enforcement to discover. The missing persons report filed for Larry Pearson joined the others in the scattered, disconnected filing cabinets of the police department, treated as just another transient adult moving on without notice. During the final stretch of 1987 and the early weeks of 1988, the tension within the Westport community remained non-existent. Residents continued to trust the neighborhood watch captain, relying on his vigilant eyes to keep their streets clear of petty crime and vandalism. The local police department maintained its fragmented approach to the missing persons files, never assigning a dedicated task force to analyze the geographic cluster of vanished young men. The administrative loop remained closed. Without a body, there was no homicide, and without a homicide, there was no comprehensive investigation. The predator walked the aisles of local hardware stores and camera shops, purchasing more heavy-duty bags, chemical supplies, and Polaroid film in plain sight of the community. He felt invincible, shielded by a massive systemic blind spot and his own carefully constructed facade of civic duty. The logbook sitting in his closet contained the exact chronological proof of his horrific supremacy, waiting silently in the dark. The entire apparatus of local law enforcement possessed no suspicion, no active leads, and no tactical plan to breach the walls of 4315 Charlotte Street. The predator prepared his basement for the next arrival, unaware that the foundation of his undetectable nightmare was about to crack violently wide open. The quiet, undisturbed era of the neighborhood watch captain stood on the precipice of a sudden, catastrophic collapse. The first week of April 1988 draped a damp chill over the quiet, residential stretch of Charlotte Street. The physical distance from the second-story window of 4315 to the unforgiving concrete driveway below measured 15 feet. On the morning of April 2nd, Christopher Bryson shattered the deceptive calm of this environment by hurling his body through the glass to escape a living nightmare. Clad in nothing but a heavy leather dog collar, he struck the hard pavement, absorbing the immense kinetic impact of the fall. The heavy leather collar dug into his neck, serving as a brutal physical reminder of the captivity he was leaving behind. Driven by sheer primal adrenaline, the young man scrambled to his feet and sprinted across 50 yards of dewy grass toward a neighboring porch. He pounded his fists against the heavy wooden door, screaming for immediate sanctuary from the terror he had endured for 4 agonizing days. A neighbor answered the frantic pleas and dialed the emergency dispatcher, prompting a swift response from local patrol units. 2 uniformed officers arrived at the curb within minutes, expecting to mediate a routine domestic dispute or a loud neighborhood disturbance. Instead, they encountered a physically broken survivor who pointed a shaking finger at the peeling pate of the modest 2-story home. Bryson recounted a horrific ordeal of chemical restraint and psychological torment, shattering the quiet facade of the local watch captain. The officers stood on the sidewalk measuring the profound disconnect between the terrified victim and the unassuming structure standing just yards away. This single, desperate act of survival severed the invisible snare and initiated the collapse of an undetectable criminal operation. Recognizing the gravity of the survivors' claims, the patrol officers secured the perimeter and summoned major case detectives to the scene. The responding investigators parked their unmarked sedans along the curb, staring at the exact residence belonging to their most trusted community informant. The physical layout of the property offered zero external clues, featuring a neatly swept porch and drawn curtains that blocked any view of the interior. Detectives established a command post on the street corner, drafting a comprehensive affidavit to secure a legal search warrant from a county judge. The bureaucratic process consumed several agonizing hours, forcing law enforcement to stand outside the closed structure while maintaining absolute visual containment. Upon receiving the signed legal authorization, a tactical entry team approached the heavy wooden front door and breached the primary lock. The initial sweep of the ground floor revealed a highly organized living room filled with antique furniture and civic awards. The air inside the main floor smelled of old paper and dust, betraying nothing of the horrors hidden below. The mundane atmosphere of the main level stood in stark contrast to the heavy, oppressive silence radiating from the lower depths of the structure. Investigators moved with measured steps through the narrow hallways, documenting every spatial detail before descending the wooden stairs into the concealed basement. They found a sterile, modified environment equipped with a robust dehumidifier and thick soundproofing materials lining the foundation walls. The tactical unit cleared the physical space, confirming the immediate threat had passed, and handed the scene over to specialized forensic technicians. The unearthing of the hidden archive was about to expose a staggering volume of undeniable historical truth. Forensic technicians shifted their focus to the second floor of the residence, measuring the dimensions of a master bedroom located at the end of the hall, inside a deep cedar-lined closet. Investigators made a discovery that altered the history of Kansas City law enforcement forever. Tucked away on the top shelf, they recovered 2 thick, heavy-bound logbooks containing hundreds of pages of tight clinical handwriting. These ledgers detailed the exact chronological progression of captivity, listing specific chemical dosages of veterinary anesthetics administered over the course of 4 years. Beside the notebooks, technicians found a massive cache of over 200 Polaroid photographs stored in neat, chronological stacks. The flashbulbs of the police cameras illuminated the dark corners of the closet, capturing the exact location where the evidence had rested for years. The visual evidence provided a step-by-step documentation of the victim's final days, stripping away any possibility of a defense based on circumstance. Detectives spread the photographs across a folding table, matching the faces in the images to the ignored missing persons flyers that had faded on community telephone poles. The timestamps written on the borders of the film created an unbroken chain of evidence, proving the precise progression of the prolonged psychological terror. The sheer volume of the physical media demonstrated the extreme arrogance of a predator who believed he would never face an institutional reckoning. Every single entry in the logbook represented a distinct failure of the administrative missing persons protocols that govern the local police department. The authorities stood in the quiet bedroom, absorbing the devastating realization that the community leader had weaponized their own bureaucratic blind spots. The scope of the investigation expanded beyond the walls of the structure, moving into the small fenced perimeter of the backyard. Crime scene technicians established a precise grid across the 50-foot span of damp earth, probing the soil for any signs of recent disturbance. Near the rear property line, excavators unearthed calcified human remnants buried just beneath the roots of a large oak tree. The forensic teams worked under the harsh glare of portable halogen lights, sifting through the dirt inch by painstaking inch. This undeniable physical discovery shattered the predator's claim that he had disposed of all evidence through the municipal sanitation system without fail. At the exact same time, a secondary search team working inside the house located another Mabord trophy hidden deep within a forgotten storage trunk. They recovered a human cranium kept as a silent testament to the horrific supremacy the shop owner held over his captives. The combination of the buried evidence and the immense photographic archive provided an insurmountable mountain of proof against the respected watch captain. Law enforcement officials handcuffed Robert Berdella at his business on Westport Road, parading the trusted civic leader through the bustling commercial center. The arrest sent shockwaves through the local district, replacing the established trust of the community with a profound, lingering dread. Detectives finally possessed the missing pieces required to connect the vanished young men, solving a massive geographic puzzle that had sat unsolved for years. The physical environment of Charlotte Street transformed from a symbol of neighborly security into an active, sprawling crime scene illuminated by the glaring lights of forensic units. The total chronological end of the operation had arrived, yielding to the heavy hand of undeniable institutional justice. Faced with the staggering volume of recovered evidence, the robust legal shield of the former neighborhood watch captain disintegrated upon contact with the truth. The defense attorneys reviewed T